Hello and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, business and investing. And today I am welcoming to the show Cameron Neal. Welcome to the show, Cameron.
Hi, B. It's great to be here.
So nice to have you. Another Melbourneite. Melbourne,
Yes.
Clifton Hill. So Clifton Hill, I'm in Elwood. I don't know how far away. It's probably like 20 minutes.
Yeah, if you could go straight, if you didn't have to go through Punch Road, you'd probably get there a lot faster, right? But I
Totally.
think that's the bottleneck.
It is the bottleneck. And a big shout out to all the listeners all around the world. Hello, how are you all? And you probably don't even know what we're talking about right now if you live on the other side of the world, or we're talking about, Melbourne and the local parts of where we live. And so, Cam, I'm going to call you Cam. Am I allowed to call you
Sure.
Cam?
Yeah, no, please do. That's fine. Yeah.
So I always go straight to a nickname. Like I just straight away.
I think professionally, I'm called Cam. Like I have all my email addresses are Cam at. Like I think Cam is like when I'm mad at myself, I call myself Cameron. So I think Cam is
Same.
fine.
Yeah, I've just noticed I've got Belinda Murray there right now. I'll need to fix that because I'm the same. I'm only ever called Belinda when I'm in trouble, so I always know, oh, this is serious. Anyway, when I met you the other week, I was quite excited to be talking to you because you have quite the story, and the name says it all in terms of what your business is called, and you've had a lot of experience working with founders, investing, and I just love the way you're reshaping Cap and what you're seeing and all the impact you're making in the world. And so let's get into it because I really want to hear about your stories and your journey. And I'm sure for all the listeners out there, they're going to take a lot of great insights away from you as well. So Cam, let's start with, you are the founder of Red Hat Impact. And you have spent much of your career exploring a question that feels increasingly urgent. What happens when the systems we've inherited are no longer fit for the future we're trying to create? Oh my God, it's just such a conversation, isn't it? Working at the intersection of finance, entrepreneurship, technology, and impact investing, and an important inflection point emerged for you, Cameron, as you recognize that many purpose-driven enterprises weren't limited by the vision or innovation. Instead, they were limited by the financial systems designed for a different era. Can't wait to get into that one. That insight led to the creation of Red Hat Impact, where you work to put capital at the service of impact through capital, consulting, and connection. And you help founders, investors, and communities build more collaborative, regenerative ways of creating value, not sustainable, regenerative. And I think that is such an important word also. Your journey reflects a shapeshift from working with traditional financial models to helping reimagine the systems that enable people, businesses, and communities to ultimately thrive. And at the heart of your work sits a simple question. And I think we'll start here. What becomes possible when we stop optimizing yesterday's systems and start designing tomorrow's?
Yeah. I mean, that is the daily question, right? I think many of us and many of your listeners, will feel this in their bodies, in their emotions, in their minds, that a lot of stuff is just not working. There's this lot of tension. There's a lot of things, right? And I have a psychology degree, so that's, I think, quite useful for the work that I do, because it's all about understanding change and how change happens and what is required for change. And change is growth, and change never feels good, right? Like it feels hard, it's challenging, it's uncomfortable. And a lot of people avoid it because it makes us feel feelings, right? And and I think at a macro level, it's a really exciting time to be in because the old ways of doing things are unfrozen. Like the future is currently up for grabs. There is an ability to reshape things now in a way there probably hasn't been for a period of stability that we had, post Second World War. Increasingly, stuff is frayed, stuff is not working. 20th century institutions and systems are not fit for what we're trying to do today and the problems that we're dealing with. And so that's exciting. It's also really scary, right? It's also really challenging, and it's also difficult to live through. And I think that's what, for me, some days it's a mental and emotional struggle to go, just remember what this is. Like, this is a difficult time. It's the end of one thing and the birth of another. It's change. It's hard. It's difficult. but it's all up for grabs. And like, you know, and I think about, well, what does it look like in 20 years from now? That's what we do today matters in terms of what it's going to look like then. But living through that shift is hard work. And I'm not denying that, you know, and I think, you know, you think about individual change in your life. Sometimes you go through you have to destroy to create, you know, like, you know, you go through a period.
You have to burn it down, I say.
Yeah,
Like,
sometimes,
you
yeah,
have
you
to burn it
do.
down to, like,
That's right. But
rebirth.
the fire feeds the soil of what grows after it, right? And I think, you know, I think there's just a lot of turmoil and a lot of stuff going on at the moment. And my focus, as you described in my introduction, B, is capital in particular, like how capital works. Because I guess, you know, what I've been on a journey on in my life, what led me to a psychology degree is I wanted to stop kids killing themselves, right? Like that was kind of my thing from school, growing up in an area where we were having a kid every second year at our school commit suicide, right? I'm like, well, what's going on? Like there's something underneath that. But my journey kind of took me to, well, actually, you know, I ended up working in Ipswich, west of Brisbane, at the time, one of the heroin capitals of Australia, lots of, you know, third generation unemployed. But, you know, it was the collapse of industry in that community that just meant there was no jobs. And the kids are just like, well, there's no future. I don't know what my life's going to be like in 5 years. Like, why do I care? You know? And I really began to understand that just the way economic policy and economic systems at a macro level were having this impact on individuals that I was trying to stop killing themselves in Ipswich, right? And increasingly going, this system that we're in, all right, what do we do to do that? And my first go at shifting that was, well, we need more businesses to do good. And, you know, that was kind of what I spent a bit of time doing is like, okay, how do we help more businesses do good? And I'm like, okay, I've done that. And then it was like, well, how do I help more good businesses? How do I help more businesses that do good be good businesses? And then that led me to what you just described before, which is, doesn't matter how much I do to help these businesses that do good be good businesses, they're just constrained because the way finance works and capital works just isn't fit for what they're trying to do. It's forcing them to make decisions that continue to be extractive, that continue to value certain things over others. Like capital's not neutral. Capital reflects power. Capital reflects a view of the world in terms of where it wants to go and where it wants to perform and make money. And so that's kind of where I'm in now, this phase of my life. And, you know, this is kind of the big shift for me that you mentioned was like, we got to fix capital, not the company. And I didn't have that framing, but I met this amazing woman called Joy Anderson and an organization called the Criterion Institute. And that's one of the mantras that they have was fix capital, not the company. I have it on my keyring now. And it's like,
I love
yes,
that.
that just puts a name to like this thing that I'm trying to grapple with, right? And so that is definitely now where we sit at Red Hat Impact, and the work that I do is like, okay, what does it need to do? And like even for ourselves, you know, we're thinking about like, how do we operate our business commercially viably when the problem we're trying to solve is that capital's not fit for purpose for what we're trying to do or anyone else. Like, how do we kind of do that in a way? How do you have a business model that's ahead, a business model that's based on what the future is going to look like, not what now looks like, right? And so I think that's a really interesting space to occupy, and it excites me every day when I'm also not despairing, you know, like, you know, those two aspects, but it's there's more potential, I think, and there's more and more people thinking about this because I think, as I said at the start, more and more of us feel in our bones that something has to be different than the way it is now.
100%. I mean, you only have to look at like governments all around the world and everything that and you talk about capital and such, it's so extractive still, and yet it's almost like becoming more and more like a straitjacket in a way, like, and so how do we open it up? And I'm hearing that potentially you're also talking about how do we make capital more conscious as well? How do we make it more like
Well, it's a question of what it's for, B, right? Like I think, you know, there's no shortage of money.
No.
There is a lot of capital in the world. But what we've seen as an example in the last 3 years is a massive increase in how much of that capital is allocated to defense, which actually is, it's not defense, it's offense, and how much is being invested in like weapons and weapon systems and whatever. And you think about the scope of that money that's being spent on that versus it's being spent on, what if we spent the same amount of money on providing opportunities for young people being born in these countries, that rather than like having to kill them, we help them realize who they can be, right? And then, I get at the core of my is like, I feel like opportunity should be equal, and it's clearly not. Like, the where you're born has such a big impact on kind
Yeah,
of where you end
absolutely.
up, even within Australia. Like,
Mm.
you're born in the wrong suburb to the wrong parents, that kind of has a trajectory on your life, and it
Totally.
shouldn't be like that. So, we make choices, and as you mentioned, governments. I think we make choices through governments every day as to what our priorities are, and for me, it's just about imagining what's possible. And I think where you've seen in the electoral landscape, people tap into a sentiment of, you are right to be angry at the establishment. We need something different, and people are flocking to that, whether it be to far right or whether it be to
Yeah, no.
progressive things. That's a compelling message, because people are like, more of the same is not going to get us where we want to be. And I think people are in general on board with that. More of the same is not what we need.
Yeah, it's
So we are
fascinating.
looking for something different.
And it is fascinating, isn't it? Because there's almost like this groundswell going on around the world that everyone is like, you talk about like, well, we both said burning down, and
Mm,
the system is broken as we
mm.
speak. The capital system is fundamentally, broken. That's a big call out here. There's heaps of capital go around. It's then what? How do we set it up for success as we go forward? And I think
How
that's
do you get the incentives right?
yeah. How do you
And
get? Yeah.
because at the moment, like, I think the system works as intended. The system is making people who have money make more money, right? But that's not the purpose of capital. Like, in Australia, we're having a debate around productive uses of capital. We're kind of saying, well, owning houses and property is not a productive use of capital. Investing in small business and businesses, that's productive use of capital. But the incentives we've got in our regulatory and finance system push capital to non-productive uses, because and if you've got money, that's what you do, because it's like, well, I can make more money by doing that, so I put it into that. And that comes down to incentives. That comes down to the way we've designed the system, right? And so I think we can, and what's exciting is that when I look around, the work that we are doing that kind of fits in an innovative finance space, there are more and more people in this worldwide. There's more and more things happening. And I think it's a feature, not a bug, in this new economy, new way of doing things, that a lot of these things are distributed, small, decentralized, right? They're responding to a particular thing in a particular place, a particular group of people, community owned, community led. That's at the level it needs to be, right?
Mm.
But then how do you get, currently, the way that our finance system works, it works best at scale and at big. But actually, the thing that we're building is about small and local. And so that's where there's this disconnect between funding the things that matter, because that are small, local, doing awesome stuff, and the way capital tends to look around going, well, that's awesome, but I need you to be 100 times bigger for it to make sense for me to invest, right? And it's like, well, how do we do that? How do we build systems of interconnection and networks? And it's just a very different way of thinking about investing and thinking about capital, in terms of investing in markets,
Yeah.
investing in place, investing in ecosystems, as opposed to investing in enterprise.
Mm. What
Sorry. I think that's one of the things that we at Red Hat Impact have been in this journey, where we used to work far more enterprise to enterprise. But now we can see that it's actually about like collectives. We're doing this awesome project in Indo-Pacific with women's businesses, right? And all of these enterprises sit at the bottom of value chains. They're paying lots and lots of money for glass jars, which they use for packaging because they in Vanuatu or Solomon Islands, someone's importing and they're paying retail prices. They're small, import's expensive because they're so far from everywhere. Solomon Islands is 900 islands, right? 906. Like, logistics is
Yeah.
expensive. And so for that individual enterprise, it's impossible to do anything about that. But what we're doing is collectivizing, going, well, let's build an organization that is like 1,000 micro, small, medium-sized enterprises run by women across the Indo-Pacific that can buy collectively.
I love that.
And it just changes the dynamic. It changes the power, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can buy collectively, and now you can pay 10 cents a jar instead of $1.10 a jar because you can buy in bulk. And you can't do that on your own, but you can do it in a collective, right? And I think that's the one of the inherent failures or things within the dominant kind of way that economics and political economy stuff works is this, the individual or the enterprise. But all of our problems, all of our challenges actually require collaboration and cooperation.
Mm.
And so, I think that's what we're trying to do as well, as go, okay, it's not just about it is the form that you're funding as well as trying to get away from enterprises and trying to get capital to think about what's the return to the market, not the market return that you get, right?
Yeah,
how do you build what's the benefit of 1,000 women's enterprises being able to run more efficiently and effectively and support each other collaboratively and mutualism across the Pacific in terms of the economic development, the jobs they create, the community outcomes. Like, the return to those markets is massive, but it would never be achieved by investing as you normally would in a single enterprise or a bank lending to a single business, right? You need to do things differently. And that's kind of what I think a lot of this comes down to imagination.
Yeah. And so is this for you, Cam? Is this when you talk about regenerative ways of creating value? It's creating almost like a collective value, isn't it? It's not sustaining the way we've always done it and ensuring that, the single enterprise or the single business is successful. What we're talking about here is, how do we create value as a collective that continues to regenerate and, like you say, ensures that women, men, everyone is, receiving what's what I'm looking for? Receiving like
Value.
Value. Everyone's benefiting from this. It's not just one, it's not a monopoly market, if you like.
And those individual success stories are often for them to be successful, it requires them to extract value.
Yeah.
It requires them to extract and pool value, right? And I think that's what I mean, when we talk about that capital's not neutral. Like, the way it wants to deploy, it wants to go to those successful businesses that are going to return lots of money to the investor. For them to achieve that, they will need to extract value from others, or they'll need to, climate crisis, they will need to externalize negative impacts to be able to achieve profit, right? And so I think what we're looking for is, how do we align the things that you and I value, being able to go outside, see green space, drink the water, clean rivers, clean air, with an economic system that doesn't put any value on those things. You might want to be able to walk down this, Trebek, she's an amazing economist here in Australia. One of the things that she has this great story of, rather than measure GDP, measure how many kids ride their bikes to school. Like, that's a true measure of value, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of things that have to exist for that to be able to happen. And those are the things that every day you and I value. You and I value being able to live in our communities, right? But go for a walk. But wealth inequality for me is at the heart of so many of the problems that we face, right? And so a lot of impact investing is really saying, well, the way to solve this is to enable rich people to invest and make more money, and increase wealth inequality to solve the problem. And it's like, well, I don't think that's the answer. But given that wealth inequality is part of the problem, we can't solve it by making wealth inequality worse. What we need to figure out is how we collectively do stuff and reorganize and connect up all these amazing local activities and initiatives that communities are doing. Like people, was it Castlereagh bought the pub like for their community? It's like, that is awesome. Like,
Yeah,
how do we do
totally.
more of that? Right? Like,
Totally.
people own their own stuff. Communities come together to do things that matter to them. Like,
Yeah.
that's what capital's for, in my opinion.
I love it. How far off do you see, like, what is this economy, like, what would we call this newfound economy? Like, and how far off are we? Because we seem to be, it's like we're in this, like, the past is broken, it's not working any longer. And we sit in this middle stage, if you
It's
like.
called the liminal. I think it's a liminal state is kind of what
Yeah.
the official term is. Like, it's the bit in between, right? And that's what I was saying at the start of this call, right? Like,
Mm,
we're in there, and it can be shaped differently. But the future's contested. Like, for every person who's doing what I do, there's a bunch of people that are trying to harness AI and technology to increase surveillance and to make more money and to do whatever, right? Like, the future is uncertain.
mm,
And so, I don't know what this period is for how long we're going to have this opportunity to shift, right? Lewin's theory of change is you go, everything's frozen and it's very difficult to change things. Everything's currently unfrozen. Well, a lot of things are, and they can change, but at some point they'll freeze again and then it'll become difficult to shift them. And we're currently in there. I don't know how long that's going to last.
mm.
What excites me and encourages me, though, B, is there are more and more people, as we say, that are like, the future has to be different. There's more and more people asking the question of what does that look like? And there are more and more local community-driven solutions and more people. And it's still small, but there are more and more kind of foundations and capital allocators that are going, there's something in this. We've got to think about it differently.
Mm, mm. And so, because you do a lot of your work offshore, like not in Australia, like you talked around, Indo, etc., etc. Do you see like more challenges? Do you face more challenges having these conversations here in Australia? Like, where do you see us at, and which country do you think is, and you may not have the answer to this, is the most advanced in, if we're in this unfrozen state at the moment?
Yeah, it is an interesting one. Like, when I look around at the work that we're involved in, I think about where are the places that are most interesting to be. US, interestingly, like, because I think you've got burning platforms there of stuff that is so extreme on one side that on the other, people are really digging in and doing really good stuff, and foundations, others are responding to that because of that tension, right? And we saw this after the GFC. The GFC hit the US and Europe a lot harder than it hit Australia. That led to a whole bunch of change and activity in those markets that Australia avoided because we largely avoided the impact. We didn't have a burning platform, whereas we got change there. And so, I think that's still true. I think you look at the US. Yes, there's some really amazing stuff happening in like some parts of Europe. UK has a lot kind of going on in it. Again, burning platform, a lot of stuff going wrong in that country. So they're, up in response to that, people are doing things. I think there's but there's also, that's just looking at the Western world, right? But I think there's also just these other ways of doing things just are still part of cultures in like
Mm,
Asia,
mm.
where there is a better kind of community focus for what's going on. Like, these Western ideas and neoliberal ideas are trying to come in there, and like they are definitely getting some traction impact. But I do think, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, there are still some really strong kind of collective mutualism, solidarity kind of values that underpin how capital gets deployed.
Because they've
That,
missed a lot of they've missed, I mean, some of the emerging markets have missed some
yeah,
of the
they have. They
trans.
have, right? And so, and that's hopefully a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But, I think as I said, I think one of the things about this new thing, whatever it's called, this new economy, I think a lot of people call it the new economy, next economy, whatever comes after this, it's not going to be one thing. It's not going to be as homogeneous as kind of like, what we've seen post-war and post-Cold War, because it's going back to being more local and community and culturally relevant and context, and people designing for context, designing for place, designing with communities to do stuff that matter there. And that will, by its very nature, mean stuff is far more diverse and far more interesting and far more, far more resilient as well, because from a biology point of view and evolution, like those things can't be all killed by the one shock, right? And so I think like that's what the challenge is, I think, is how do we begin to weave, a mycelium network, the mushroom mycelium kind of metaphor for what this next thing looks like. That is, political economy that is grounded in place and local and community, that sustains and nourishes each of the nodes, right? Without having to be one huge monolithic thing. It's going to be diverse. It's the opposite of a monoculture. It's like, it's lots of different things. So people going, hey, that's really cool. How do we borrow from that? What
Yeah.
can we learn? Do you want to learn from this? And so, I think that's one of the things that as I've got older, understanding that the world is a big place,
Mm.
stories that we tell ourselves about the world are often not stories about the world. They're stories about a particular view of the world, a particular culture within the world. And there is so many awesome things going on in so many different places. And in what one is one person's apocalypse, somewhere else in the world, people are experiencing rebirth. And you mentioned, B, I had the privilege of spending some time late last year, started this year, in Timor-Leste.
Yes.
Very young country in terms of years that it's been a country, but also young country in terms of the number of people that are under 25,
Mm.
like 70% of the population or so.
Wow.
And the hope that they have, like, the ingenuity, the creativity, the hope for the future. Like the women that I got to work with that are building for their community and for themselves and are proud of their culture and trying to take it to the world and really trying to, like, it's a very, very, very different vibe entirely from Clifton Hill in Melbourne, right? Like it
Yeah.
is,
I
it,
know,
it
man.
it's
Yeah.
and you cannot help but be infected by the and the creativity that they have, the hardship they've come out of. They were occupied for 500 odd years by the Portuguese and then by the Indonesians. We've got our freedom. Their determination to build something for themselves is phenomenal, right? And it's just there above us. But the contrast and difference of like what that experience of that people and that culture to our own, like you can't flatten that into a single model, right? Like, and
No.
I think that you gotta like everywhere you go, you find this, and that's what's exciting, is that there are, as things crumble, and you kind of need them to crumble so these new things can grow,
Yeah, burn down,
and
yeah. That's what I
yeah,
keep saying, burn,
yeah,
baby, burn. So my
yeah.
question on that is, Cam, in terms of, like you mentioned before, around not fixing, what was it, the business and capital?
Fix the capital, not the company. Yeah.
Yeah, so fix the capital, not the company. Tell us a little bit about that, because, from a Timor perspective, what they're doing, and how is Red Impact, and how are you going into businesses or working with founders where you're like, that's a big call out, fix the capital, not the company.
Mm.
How does
Look,
that work? Because
Timor's an interesting example, right? You've got a national bank that's owned by the Timorese government, BNCTL. You've got not much else. Like the government's the biggest employer and the biggest buyer in the country. You've now got some mining stuff beginning to come in. Tourism's very nascent. But like the capital markets in Timor are really completely underdeveloped, compared to what's available here in Melbourne. But what's the type of capital that's going to be provided? Some people are going, oh, great. Well, we'll do, we can do microfinance. It's like, okay, well, that will meet some part of the market. People are like, well, we can do VC. And I had the conversation like, well, what are you going to invest? Like, what are you going to invest in? Like, what's the equity? So the work that we're doing there is to go, all right, what do you need money for? And what's the right type of capital to do that? That keeps you in control. I guess we have a bias to non-dilutive forms of capital, largely credit instruments that can not have people give it. Because again, like, these are not businesses that have been established to be for-profit share selling businesses. Like, that, investing in equity in them just makes that's not what they exist for. They're not planning to exit, right? They're building these things for legacy for their families and the future of their country. So traditional models just that want to come in and work, like, they are going to pull that businesses in that community to go a certain way, as opposed to going, you know what, you do what you need to do, and we'll try and find capital that actually is prepared to sit alongside you to help you achieve your objective. And that can be like, the 1,000 women enterprise buying cooperative type thing I talked about before. Tia Marie's businesses can do that, right? They don't have access to that right now, but if we build that thing in the project we're working on, then women's businesses there can go, well, I need 10,000 jars in the next 12 months, and I need sewing machines, and I need whatever. And rather than having to go out and get financing, our vehicle pre-finances them or just delivers the stuff they need to them, and they pay out of revenue, right? So again, it's just trying to go, what do enterprises need? And like, that's a very different question, because most of the time it's like, what do investors need? And those are not the same answers.
No, totally.
And so I think for us, when we talk about fix the capital, it's really starting from, well, what's it for? What do you need money for? What are you trying to do? What's the achievement? And how do you do that ongoing?
Yeah.
And for us, there is capital, there is debt elements and, some traditional stuff that'll work, but it's also creating these collective things where on their own, and that's what microcredit did where it works well, is it didn't fund one woman in a village in Bangladesh when, the Grameen got started. It funded collectives of women that held each other accountable and supported each other. Like, it's that, right? It's kind of going...
network effect, isn't it?
Yeah, like, and if we default to just funding individual businesses, it's not going to work. We need to fund markets. We need to fund collectives. We need to fund groups. We need to go, what does the market need? And how do we fund that? Because there's so much ecosystem debt in these countries. Like, you try and do something here in Australia, there's a whole bunch of stuff you take for granted that just does not exist on the ground in emerging markets. And when you don't have those things, what the enterprise has to do, in addition to doing the thing you're funding them to do, they've also got to do all the other ecosystem things so they can do that thing. And that's really expensive. And expecting them to be able to do that and still generate market returns is madness, right? So for us, fixing capital is as much about engaging with capital allocators, policymakers, etc., to ask them to imagine differently and to prioritize the needs of women, micro, small to mid-sized enterprise owners, as opposed to saying, how do we attract capital from large investors who are going to want massive returns, right? It's a mindset shift. It's about imagination.
It's a behavioral change piece. Do you think this is also redefining what wealth looks like, on a global scale? Like, I mean, we're always going to have the super wealthy, ultra high net wealth. We're always going to have like the various different systems, if you like, of.
Well, maybe we are, maybe we're not. I wouldn't.
So that's my question. I should say we always are. Like, so for me, because I've just been writing some stuff down, and we're talking about here what the word capital actually means as we go forward. And generally capital equals money. Of course it does, or economy, but we're talking about a value. We're talking more about a value here, a value exchange, etc. It feels like, I think about for profit, not for profit, wealth. It's almost like there's all these facets to
Yeah, there is.
capital that are kind of like you say, they're unfreezing or unfrozen, and it's like,
Mm.
what is the next shape form going to look like? It's fascinating, and it's an exciting time.
And over
Like,
over what time frame,
and
right?
totally. And so my question to you on that is then, why do we keep coming right back to the very beginning of our conversation? What is it that is holding us in this continuing to optimize the systems, yesterday's systems? We're unfrozen, we go here and then we end up back over here. Is it because we're scared? Is it fear? Is it safety? Is it what we've always known? Like, what do you think it is?
This is where I think some of my psychology degree definitely comes in handy, because I think it's, we are social beings. I think it's really difficult for most of us to do things that go against the herd, that goes against the
Yeah.
tribe, right? We need, back to some of my answers, we often need a burning platform to motivate us to do things differently. Importantly, when those burning platforms come, when you do things differently, there have been some members of the tribe that have already done the work on what the solutions are, but they're not mass adopted. They're not kind of like what everyone does, because they're still small and they're still untested. And so I think it's natural, like you and I, and like, I speak for myself, this is the job I do. I still participate in the economy as it is now,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
But, you can't not, right? And so that's the tension that you live in, right? As the old is being replaced by the new, there's a tipping point at some point, and we don't know when that is. But, I think it's, there is, there's lots done on behavior change. You think about when did recycling take off? When there was a recycling bin in everyone's house, right? You made it really easy. Like, it became an easy thing to do. I think at the moment, it's difficult. Like, you have to care a lot to do something different than the mainstream, and until there's a burning platform, until you're in Castlemaine and the pub's going to disappear, and you're like, no, we'd love that pub. It needs to stay.
We need to keep
People mobilize to do it, right? And so, but someone had the model, someone had the solution, someone had the imagination to go, well, we can do this together. So when people asked that question, there was an answer, right? And I think it's unrealistic to expect that, we all do what we can see. We all do what we know. What we need to figure out is, like, how more of these alternatives get picked up and what gets offered. And we've talked a bit about politics. People will come along and offer a solution to the thing you're feeling, right? And it's like, well, okay, I know stuff needs to be different. I will vote for something to be different, right? Whether that's the right answer or not, people feel like it needs to be different, and they're right? But there needs to be options given to them. If there's no options given to them, then people will just do what they do. How do we make it easy? How do we make it just as easy as what they've always done? Or how do we meet the moment when there's a burning platform to go, there's a better way to rebuild. There's a better alternative to that. I think meeting people at that point of exploration, that point of, I need to do something different, I'm feeling motivated to shift, to change, that's when you got to meet them there, right? And I think I'm not sitting around judging people. I'm going, how do I work to change the incentives? How do I work to build exemplars that people can copy? How do I have more people understand that it's not about getting enterprises investment ready, it's about getting capital ready to go where it's needed, right? Like, that just requires a shift in that. How do we meet people when they start asking that question? When foundations, the massive wealth transfer that's happening in the world, in the Western world right now, as boomers are aging out and dying and handing money to their kids, they are asking questions of, well, what's it for? Like, what do I want to do? So how do we meet them in that moment to go, there's a different way, and some foundations are really trailblazing that example and talking to their peers around, here's what it can look like. Here's what you can do. And that's, it's super exciting. You're getting people like, Melinda Gates, who has she's taken the portion that she's got and she's just like gone, bang, she's given away so much money, right? And like she's just trying to use that money to transform women's reproductive health, amongst
Yeah,
other
it's
things, right?
amazing.
You
Mm,
know, and so people like that are trailblazing to go, this is what money's for.
mm.
Look at what we can do.
Money for
And
good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, you know, I think there are more and more examples of that every day that
Yeah.
should fill us with hope. While there's stuff going on and US and Iran are bombing each other, like that's bad. But every day there is good. And the more you look for that and the more you tap into that, the more inspiring it is to go, wow, there's this network of all these people
Mm.
that are working on the solutions for what comes next. At some point we will need them at scale, and we'll all start turning to them. That day hasn't arrived yet, but we're in this liminal
Come.
stage.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
come.
we're in it, and I don't know when we get through it.
Formless. I call it the formless, liminal formless, same
Yeah,
thing.
well, I mean, it's a pretty consistent with what you're trying to talk
Yeah,
about, B,
totally
right?
right.
Yeah.
Totally. So then my second last question, here I am saying, oh, we'll just go for like 30 minutes. We're 41 minutes in, we've been flowing. My second last question to you is, what keeps you going? Like, you must face sometimes just shutdowns, or like, because you are trailblazing yourself and you have been for quite some time, impact investing, you know, it's not following the status quo. You're actually doing something very significant in reshaping capital. What keeps you going? Like, you must have, what is it?
I think 3 things. 1, it's not something you can do alone. Like,
Mm.
I have awesome colleagues at Red Hat Impact, at Lend for Good, awesome founders you speak to, you know, like, you should never try and do this alone. It's difficult. It's a team sport. It's a contact sport. It it hurts. You need a support crew. You need a team to do this. And so doing it in solidarity, in collaboration, you'll support each other. Some days I'm not up for it, but I talk to my colleagues and bang, like, yeah, okay, no, we've got this. You know, like you need those people. You don't. I would not be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have the people that I work with, and you know, that community of founders and others that I work with, that I see the inspiring work that I enable them to do, right? That is really motivating. 2, I'm very privileged to have an amazing partner who backs me to do the work that I do, you know, so that if
That's
it
like,
does take a long time to make some of this happen and to turn it into money, like I don't have to worry about how I'm going to like put a roof over my head. Like that's honestly a really important part of
yeah,
building
absolutely.
that support network for myself, you know, of how you do that. And the third thing is my kids, right? Like, you know,
The future.
yeah, like the future is contestable and it's contested. And what does that look like? And what's the world they're going to grow up in? Well, I want to make sure I've done everything I can so that the future that they're going to have and that their kids may have is more this way than that. It's a, you know, it's
Yeah,
a
I love it.
continual contest, right? Like, you know, and I
Totally.
think some days it's just like, all right, I look at them and I'm like, this is what
Yeah, sure.
I'm called to do. And
Yeah, I
so,
was about to say, it's your calling. It's your
yeah.
calling. And then what's after unfrozen? Like, it's, if we're in an unfrozen moment, what's the next stage?
Well, yeah, you freeze again into something new, right?
Yeah, so it's a
What
continuous
what
form
what do I
changing.
hope it is? I hope it's this mycelium type network of all these awesome community level distributed awesome things that are funding things that matter and reinvesting capital in their community ownership, community value, you know, and that we're finding some way to nourish each other. There's a awesome interview I saw with a Lakota Indian, and I wish I could remember his name, but he was involved in the oil pipeline conflict that's happening over in the US. I'm not sure it's still going, but under Biden, it was definitely there. And what he said was profound. He's like, you know, he's like, you come to the camp here, that where we're here gathering to oppose this, every your needs are met. You'll get food, accommodation, the kids get schooling, it all happens. No one pays a thing. Everyone just contributes and we do it. He's like, my people have been through 2 apocalypses already. Climate crisis is bringing the 3rd one to us. But this our ability to collaboratively live together and support each other is just what us through to others is going to get us through the next one,
Yeah, absolutely.
you
I
know?
couldn't agree
And
with you
so like,
very
I'm
more.
like, wow, yes. Like this collaboration, collectivism, solidarity, all the things that in our Western mind have been the opposite of kind of individualism and liberalism, like those are the things that have got us through, right? And I think things will probably get worse before they get better. But it's that. How do you build those
I
networks
agree.
of solidarity and relationship and support each other and support yourself? People that you can hug and touch
Lean
and
on. Yes,
yeah, lean on.
I
It's
agree.
that, right? And yeah.
So, final question for you. What would be one piece of advice you could give myself or the listeners right now in terms of coming right back to this company capital point you made earlier? What's one thing that we could all be doing as
Mm.
leaders, founders in business as our first step whilst we're in this unfrozen? What would be something that you would suggest that we could do?
Like there are a lot of things that I could think of,
Mm.
but I think some of the most practical or easiest thing is just to go like, it's kind of who looks after my money? Like, where's your super? Who are you banking with? Supporting community owned banks, supporting super funds that put your money into doing good things. That's something that it is actually not that difficult to
Mm.
do. And I think that's something that, again, it's just moving our money to places that support creating the world that we want to be a part of,
Yeah, I
the
love that.
community that we're being a part of.
That's
You know,
awesome.
Bendigo has a network of community owned banks. Maybe there's one near you, if you're in Australia, right? Start with that. I mean, again, like that will not substantially change anything about how you live your life, but it will put money and capital into places that are allocating that capital into things that do good for the world.
And
And think,
regenerating new ways to create value,
yeah,
when it comes
exactly.
to the
Yeah.
economy.
And that's a useful thing we can all do. So have a look around. I mean, I think again, as I say, there are in communities so many things that are being done and so many great initiatives out there that if you start looking around and paying attention and going, okay, what does this look like? You'll find things and just go, okay, again, turn up, talk to people. I think again,
Yeah, I
it's not
agree.
something we have to do as individuals. I think that's the other thing I just say is like find other people that care about this and talk with them. Share a
Yeah,
bottle of wine and talk about it.
yeah. It's coming. It's the groundswell is there. Cam, how do we find out more about you? How do we find out more about Red Hat Impact, everything else you're doing?
The best was redhatimpact.com. Check out our website. You'll find there my profile on LinkedIn. Happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me questions, connect with what we're doing, follow along there.
Amazing. Cam, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm going to get you back on in like 6 months and see where we're at
See
and
if we've moved. Yeah.
see how much more has unfrozen.
There's pros and cons of that, B. But yes, look, it's just I think my parting message is just it's an exciting time,
No, I agree.
and I know with journey you've been on and what this podcast is about, there is a kind of letting go that requires to kind of come what's after. That is challenging for us all and painful, and it
Yeah,
hurts,
yeah, it
but
does.
it's part of the journey.
It's part of the journey and there's always the other side. So
Exactly.
on that note, thank you so much. Enjoy this dreary winter
Yes,
day and school holidays. Have fun
I
and
will. Thank
for
you.
coming on the show.
Thanks, B.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
No, thank you.